everyone, and welcome to the College Chaps podcast. On this episode, we're going to talk about what seems like a perennial discussion, the expansion of the college football playoff. But first, for the Chaps, I'm George, and with a little help from my friends, I'm joined by the Lennon and McCartney of the college football world. We don't come together that often, but help, it's time to let it be, as it's just a day in the life of Oliver and Alex. How are you both?
George, I fucking hate the Beatles. That's the
No,
worst. That is the worst intro you've ever done.
that's that. No, it's not really, but.
It's not. It was well put together. The thought was there.
I also, I see myself a little bit more as Ringo, you know, not massively talented, but talented at a lot of things. That kind of sums me up. So,
Beautiful.
It,
I love
this
it.
this podcast is going in various directions already, and we're
all
just
I'm saying is don't be surprised if you hear me voicing a children's TV character in 20 years' time. That's all I'm saying.
That could have gone very wrong.
that's, there's something about this episode so soon. I don't know. It doesn't bode well for the next 27 minutes.
Like, to me, what I knew Ringo Starr for growing up was voicing Thomas the Tank Engine.
Yeah,
So,
100%.
That's very true. See, different generations. That's what this podcast brings you.
oh, what a start. What a
What's
start.
that? We're going to talk about college football expansion. It kind of feels like we talk about this. I was going to say every year, but it feels like we talk about this every 6 months. No great surprise that the coaches this week expressed their desire to move to a 24-team college football playoff. I mean, it's not like this is the first time it's been mooted, far from it. But what we have seen is that when the administrators decide on something, the coaches say, "Nah, that doesn't really suit us particularly well. Let's go this direction." And 24 seems to be a number that has got a lot of people comfortable. Now we saw this last year with the proposal from the Big Ten. Well, before we get into how do we fit all this into a one calendar year of college football, what do we think about 24 team playoff?
Do you want to go first, Alex?
Yeah, I think I'll go first. What a useless old piece of old tripe this is. Just to put it into context, 24 teams. I, I wouldn't have minded seeing James Madison in a playoff game. Cool, they were ranked 24. Hey, but above them, one place above them was Iowa, who went 8-4 this year. We don't need to see them play another game. That just doesn't need to happen. Yeah, if you lose 4 games in the regular season, I don't need to see you in the postseason. And that is the crux of it. 24 is way too many. There's not that many good teams. You're gonna have dull first round games every year with 24 teams in.
We're still going to have teams throwing their toys out the pram when they're ranked 25, 26, 27. So if we think that argument's going away, then we're in for a nasty shock.
Well, yeah, because North Texas went 11-2 and were ranked 2 spots below Iowa. So you don't think they're going to be annoyed when it's a 24 team playoff and they've won 3 more games and they're not in? Like they're not solving the problems the right way.
Uh, Ollie, before I hear your view on 24, which I really hope is opposing to Alex, but um, do you think we will get to the nirvana of we'll have 25 ranked teams, 24 ranked teams, sorry, or will this proposal just be so full of guaranteed spots for particular conferences? All it's going to do is fill up a quotient for a conference.
Yeah, it's an interesting point actually because there's, we talked about this in previous episodes where it was like the Big Ten model favored so many automatic qualifying spots for the Big Ten and the SEC and various different models that are banding about favor a certain amount of automatic qualifiers. I think with all of those though, there's always been an at-large element. So the rankings will still exist. The rankings will still have the same debate and ranker and everything that makes people tune into ESPN on a Tuesday evening for 6 weeks of the year. So that satisfies the ESPN's desire for TV audience. So to your point about arguing over who's in the 24th spot versus the 26th spot or whatever, you just move in the conversation further down the line. So we've spent so many years arguing about the teams who were ranked fourth, fifth, and sixth, for example. And then you go to argue about the teams that are ranked between 10th and 14th, for example. Then you just boot it further down the line. And when you're supposed to be having an argument about quality teams, like, oh yeah, these it's so hard to split these three teams who are ranked fourth, fifth, and sixth. They're all so good. Like, how do you have that debate and conversation about the 24th, 25th, 26th, 27th ranked teams? Because to Alex's point, Iowa gets ranked there every year, whether they're fucking good or not. And it just makes it a difficult conversation. So I think to your original question, George, the rankings will still have a part because they will have to have a part to satisfy TV audiences, or sorry, not TV audiences. I don't think any TV audiences are satisfied. They'll have to satisfy TV executives. I know we have a good number of ESPN guests on here, so be careful how deeply we go trashing that fine institution, the market leader in sports media broadcasting. Um, there'll never be a completely automatic qualification um, element to it. I don't believe. Anyway, that's my 10 cents.
But like, let's look at it because we got news today that March Madness is expanding as well on the college basketball side. But the reason that March Madness works and it has so much attention just for that one window of the year is because of the upsets, right? Because of the Cinderella stories.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen in football because the numbers just don't work. Okay? On a college basketball roster, maybe 15 players, 15 to 20 players on a college basketball roster that see the court, 8 to 10 on each team see the court in any given game. On a college football roster, there's over 100 people. So the trickle down of talent just isn't there. Hey, you could be a really good basketball player and go to a smaller, less well-known D1 and still go and make it to the NBA. There's countless examples of it. Right, less so now. They're still even in college basketball, but because of the draft rules as well for basketball, everything just favors these lesser teams being able to compete every so often. And it's not actually as often as people make it out to be. It's more an ESPN story, ESPN selling March Madness, than it is actually what happens in terms of upsets. But you're not telling me that Georgia Tech's going to be able to go in up against Notre Dame and win, right? It's just not going to happen in a in the first round of a playoff series for college football. You know, Alabama's not losing to JMU in the first round of
But
the
the
college
truth,
football.
you make such a great point because the truth of the matter is football is actually chasing the success of March Madness, right? Because March Madness as a television contract and as a spectator sport is fantastic. Arguably, Omaha with the college baseball is a massive spectator sport. I don't know what the television contract is for that, but that's an incredibly popular event on its own. Both of those in a fairly concise period of time. Football isn't there yet, right? Football is still struggling to find it's in that playoff scenario, but it's not quite got the same, cachet or the same grip that March Madness and Omaha has. I don't think. I think that's why they're tinkering with the model because they just can't get it right. You'd have to say that the playoffs over the last few years haven't been gripping. To be perfectly honest, I don't think.
College football has a problem, and they've tried to solve it in that the gap between the regular season and the Final Four is almost too long. And you lose some of the momentum that you create. Almost the best and most fun weekend is the conference championship weekend. Or actually the weekend before, the rivalry game weekend over Thanksgiving is the best weekend of college football, usually. Hey, people playing for positions, they're playing for playing big games against opponents, and you see good teams going up against one another. And we just haven't, not that we haven't had that in the playoffs, but you don't care in the same way, right? Alabama Auburn's always going to matter because it's a local game. And actually, what I like, if they want to expand this, keeping it local and regionalized is the best way to go. Because, yeah, it's fun for us sitting here in the UK, where if we get to see Indiana and Georgia play early on in the season, right? That's great fun for us, right? And there's a little bit of care from the fan base on either side if those teams are good. But if those teams aren't good, then no one's going to care. But whenever Alabama and Georgia play, even if one of those teams isn't good, that fan base is caring because it works, because it's all in that same area of the country. As we've always heard about when people come on the show, it's people that you got to work with. It's people that you know and you see in the street that are maybe on the other side of the rivalry. That's why these local rivalries work. So yes, you can expand the field. You can make it almost a big knockout competition for the season, but you got to regionalize it. Teams won't want to do that though, because if you're one and done on the whole season, then you're not giving the kind of experience that you want to give to your student athletes and the money that you're putting into it.
I guess going back to March Madness, the early part of that is regionalised, but you raise a good point about the conference championships, and Ollie, I wanted to ask about there's a maybe an obvious outcome of this, which is how do we fit this expanded playoff into the current schedule? It won't fit. Alex has already talked about too many games. So there's been a lot of chat this last week about conference championship games having to be removed. And maybe even I'm sure we'll talk about bowl games. And we've talked a lot about bowl games in the past, how important it is for them to stay. But you could have two quite exciting parts of the season removed to fit in with the expanded playoff. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it sucks, honestly. And again, I think we've talked about this on the show before. Like, I'm a big proponent of conference championships games should matter. Why play a conference schedule? Why play within a conference if you're not competing to win that conference? So, like Alex said, it's conference championship weekend as for as long as we've been around the sport as fans or covering the sport. It's been one of the highlights of the season every season. Everyone wants to watch the SEC championship game. Everyone wants to watch the Pac-12 championship game on a Friday night. Everyone wants to watch the Big Ten championship game because it's such a spectacle from Lucas Oil Stadium, and everyone should have the opportunity to experience that and play for a conference championship on a grand scale. Like it'd be like, you know, I don't know. I'm trying to think of the soccer equivalent, like winning the FA Cup, but not at Wembley, or yeah. I think it should mean something. And to a larger scale point about college football as a whole, you're going to expand the college football playoff field to 24 teams, and you're going to have 114 teams who aren't going to play in the college football playoff. Of those 114 teams that aren't going to play in the college football playoff, a very good chunk of those teams are not going to realistically compete to play in the college football playoff. So what you're taking away is you're taking away the opportunity for a team like Central Michigan to go and play at Ford Field and compete for a MAC title. You're taking away the opportunity for, you know, I'm trying to think of another conference off the top of my head where they don't play, where they play their conference championship game at a neutral site in a big, like in a grand stadium. But you're removing the opportunity for so many teams just to satisfy so few teams. And for me, how many times do you have a conversation about college football and you talk about how many SEC titles Alabama have won, or how many Big Ten titles Ohio State have won, or how many Big 12 titles is a pretty rubbish argument now. Texas and Oklahoma flipped to the SEC, but we're gonna have Kansas and Arizona State coming over to the UK later on this year. Like, you want to talk about the Big 12 title and winning it in A&T Stadium in Arlington. Like, I think conference championship should mean something. I think it should be decided on a grand scale. And there's so much of college football that won't benefit from an expanded college football playoff, but will have to face the consequences of those decisions. And that I think that means something for a lot of people, and it means something for me.
I guess to circle back for a second and to play devil's advocate, was it last year or the year before when Georgia were in the SC Championship game with it's either Alabama or Texas. It might be in the Texas game, and I'll caveat this by saying it was Lane Kiffin, but Lane Kiffin made the point about, well, if you're in the playoffs and you know you're going to be in the playoffs, do you want to play in that championship game and one risk a defeat which may impact where you sit on the playoffs?
But in an expanded playoff field, that's not going to matter, is it? Because if you're Georgia or Texas and you lose the SEC championship game, you're not going to get bumped down from 10th to 27th, are you?
No, but you might get bumped from 10 to 14 or 15. And all I'm saying, and sorry, that wasn't really my point. My point was that what we're talking about here is that the coaches have said they want to move to 24. So whatever anybody else wants to talk about, it's the coaches who ultimately will then put pressure on their athletic directors to say, listen, this is where we've got to be. We've got to be at this stage. And it feels like 24 is somewhat inevitable in that respect. But and then to fit it into the schedule, I think we end up. I'm on the same page as you. I think it would be a travesty if you when you think about the SEC championship game was effectively the first conference championship game to be played. Then the success of it. I mean, at that point they were really criticised for introducing that game. And then everyone saw how popular it became, and then conference championships just became a thing. It would be such a shame to lose it after it being built into such a spectacle, which they all are, right? As you say, neutral venue, two sets of fans. In December, it's pretty compulsive viewing, I think.
I also think, like, looking at what 24 would look like, so you'd imagine the top eight
Mm.
seeds get a bye to the second round, and then the next 16 teams play off to go into that round. So you're adding potentially 5 games on to the end of the season for these guys at a time where, I get it. Half of the players that go and play football in college aren't there to go to class, but the ones that are trying to go to class, you, not everyone is Mendoza, right? But the kid comes out with a really, really cool, really great degree. And you look at all the kids that are only ever going to play in college, that aren't ever going to play in the pros, and you're adding loads of extra weeks, loads of extra stress on the body. 20 extra games potentially to someone's college career. Granted, unlikely, but like even if you're playing 4 years at a good school that makes it to the national championship game 4 years in a row, that's still 16 games you're adding to your college career. It's a whole extra season and a bit's worth of games over the course of your 4 years. And I think there's definitely some elements of player welfare in there. I think what you'll start to see is the season will have to get shorter, the regular season. So you'll see teams not really playing out of conference games. Maybe they play one warm up and one game against a lesser team that's local, and then they fire straight into their conference schedule for the year, and you have a shorter regular season and a longer playoff um, season. To me, the only way it works though is if those eight that get a bye are conference champions. I don't know how you select the eight conferences that get those byes, but to me, to make the conference championships worth it, you have to go out and win your conference, which should then also rebalance the power of some of these conferences a little bit because don't get me started on the conferences and the way they're set up right now. But if you get a guaranteed spot for being in the Pac-12, half the West Coast teams are going to jump back to the Pac-12 pretty quickly. And I think that element kind of solves the issues of rewarding the conference championship games, plus slightly shorter regular season. Maybe you get one warm-up game, one out of conference game, and then you're into your regular season, your conference schedule. Um, and that might become the new norm for some of these top end teams because they're not going to want to play. You don't want to jump from playing 13 games to playing 16 games, 17 games in a season. That's going to take a big toll on bodies within the group.
So there's a couple of questions I want to ask on the back of it. The first one is you touched on out of conference games. We've seen over the last 12 months, 18 months, raft of games which were scheduled between out of conference opponents being scrapped, right? Alabama confirmed today that the Ohio State series remains, but the Oklahoma State games have gone. That, to my mind, can only be about the SEC moving to 9 conference games and their assumption that schedules is going to get more difficult as they go through, and therefore they are worried about the additional loss on their resume, right? So moving to 24, back to Ollie's point, does that eradicate that issue? And then the second point I want to make is I heard David Pollock talking in a podcast this week about how he thinks that will improve competition. So as you get through the end of the season, where teams perhaps wouldn't have had as much to play for, now become into the reckoning for a spot in the 24, and therefore competition just goes up that ante. Do you think it resolves those two issues?
Yes and no. I think it does. I still think, obviously Iowa aside, this year you had to have a good season to make it into the top 25. Even the teams that are in there that are 9-3, Georgia Tech going 9-3 is pretty good for them. Houston maybe not so much going 9-3, but like, 9-3 is still a decent football team. Hey, so we can kind of live with seeing those teams maybe in a first round, especially if it's a shorter conference schedule. I think you've got to make it so that because if you have both a mix of conference winners and at-large bids, it doesn't matter then if you get upset in the conference championship. If you're the number one seed or number one ranked team, you've been undefeated all year, and you go and you lose in the conference championship game, it's not the end of the world, right? You're still going to have a pretty good seed. You might have to go through that first round and play the extra game, which is good because it means the champ games still matter. But also, if you're a team that has lucked into a conference championship game spot, you might have lost a big out of conference game, but you've done really well in conference and suddenly you can win your way into that first round. Yeah, I kind of get it. I'm still not totally sold on the idea, but I kind of get some of the thinking of where they're coming from, but only if you guarantee spots for multiple conferences, not just the big conferences, which is where I think it will fall down.
Ollie, does this improve competition throughout the full season, do you think?
Excuse me, potentially. Potentially. But I mean, if you're going to argue it's going to improve competition, then there's the counter argument that if you want to improve competition, then you would play a 12 game schedule of the toughest opponents you could face and hope that that was good enough. But you're still going to see teams that, let's use Alabama, for example. Sorry, George. You keep Ohio State because Ohio State is going to be a marquee win on your resume. or or as we've seen in previous years, it's going to be a really quality loss that we should all be celebrating having on our resume because we've got a quality loss. But you then fill your other out of conference games with teams that you're going to absolutely batter out of the park, so that you guarantee that you finish as high as possible, 10 and 2, 11 and 1, 9 and 3, so that you're in the top 24, so that you're within the 2014 playoff. So there's definitely multiple ways of looking at it. I don't think any college football team is competing any less come week 13, whether they're 11 and or 2 and 9. I think, you want to compete from the start to the end. And I just think, there's two very different trains of thought, two different thought processes that go into thinking that this is going to improve competition throughout the top to bottom of college football. Because if that's really what you thought it would be, then you wouldn't see all these teams cancelling those, those big time matchups in order to fill their schedule with so-called lesser teams. For what it's worth.
I would like to think also for those schools who don't have quality opposition on their schedules, it might encourage them to perhaps beef up their schedule because
Well, I mean, we saw that in college basketball, right? This last season, that I don't know, I don't even profess to know a deal about college basketball, but you saw it this year, like Miami of Ohio, talking about like really wanting to beef up their schedule, really wanting to get marquee programs on their schedule, and those marquee programs being scared to schedule those games. So how do you combat that? This is the thing, right? Like, of course, every team that wants to be in with a shot of playing in the college football playoff, James Madison, like Alex touched on them earlier, they have the same thing. Like they wanted to schedule P4 opposition. P4 programs didn't want to play them because they know that if they play a good group of five, group of six, whatever you want to call it now, team, there is a chance that you can lose to a James Madison, and no P4 program wants to take that chance of having that loss on their resume and not being in the college football playoff.
and arguably um it all rides on the back of a playoff committee that isn't fixated on the win column and the loss column, or actually the loss column. But okay, let's wrap this up. One last question then. Is 24 the final answer, or like basketball, are we heading to a larger number? So was Mike Leach right? Are we moving to 64? Are we moving to 128? I mean, where does it stop?
Well, I think this is the key thing, right, from this week is the wording of everything around the college football playoff expansion has been maximum participants, and everyone's taken the phrase maximum participants to mean 24. And I think that's what it means right now. But the phraseology of it suggests that at some point, someone will go similar, like your point to your point, George. Someone in basketball, with the expansion of college basketball, March Madness. I don't know whether we're allowed to call it March Madness. The NCAA are very particular about marketing and who uses the trademark March Madness. It turns out.
Taken off the
Um,
air so
yeah, get
quick.
taken off the air.
It was a
We had a good run of
it was a
7 years.
wild ride.
But yeah, I mean, to that point, it'll come a time where it'll serve someone somewhere to examine whether 24 was enough. So yeah, it could very definitely be the end of not the end of the conversation.
I was going to say it doesn't feel like the end, Alex. It doesn't feel like 24 is going to be enough for anybody. I just think we're just going to keep on, keep on.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's done at 24. I think it'll be at 24 for a couple of years and then it'll expand again and they'll have to come up with a new solution because you can't play two games. You can't play a game every 3 days. So it can only get so big. There's only so many weeks to put these games on without pushing into the regular season.
Yeah. The cautionary tale here is the way the Champions League has evolved. It used to be exciting, it's less exciting these days. But there you go. Alex doesn't agree.
There's some reasons for that, but too long to go into it on this podcast.
Yeah, we're running out of time. That's all the time we have for this episode. As always, it's great to hear the thoughts of Ollie and Alex. Thanks to you for listening and supporting or watching us. Please subscribe to Apple Podcasts or YouTube. Stay safe and well, and catch you all next time.